Hi, I am Rachel Romeliotis, a senior editor at O'Reilly, and I'm here with Matthew Baxter Reynolds. He is the author of Programming Windows 8 Apps with C Sharp, and he's also an independent software development consultant. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, no problem. Hi.
So Surface and Windows 8 are out. How do you think the market is shaping up?
Okay, so we're now starting to get into a place where the market is getting really interesting. As we go into 2013, what I think we're going to start to see is businesses who are being asked to deliver applications on tablets now have another option. Previously, it was a case of, well, you really had to deploy iPad. Now, companies, especially those who have more of a bias towards using Microsoft stuff anyway, now have the option of delivering on Windows 8 and Windows RT tablets. And the way that the Windows Store apps are designed fits in well with the sort of the management style you need for those, the security style you need for those. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of disruption, primarily in the tablet space, not so much in the desktop space, but it should get to a position where businesses can really decide, do we want to deploy an iPad, do we want to deploy on Windows tablets, or do we want to even do a mix of the two?
Interesting. And so the apps on Windows 8 can be programmed in three main ways, as you know, C++, C Sharp, and then HTML and JavaScript. Can you talk a little bit about, why we're seeing those and who you think would be a candidate for each type of development?
Okay, so if you're talking business applications, the C++ DirectX route is relatively easy to ignore because these are primarily designed for delivering game software. This really then means you have the XAML C# track and the HTML JavaScript track. The way that I tend to describe these to my clients is that it's like Microsoft are trying to fight a battle on two fronts. So effectively, you've got the XAML and C# stuff, which is based on technology that they've been developing. Some of it since 2001, some of it since 2003, very mature, very finished technology, which fits well into the sort of the composed desktop model design. On the other side, you've got the HTML JavaScript, which is very open standards. It's all good stuff, but it's much less part of Microsoft's development heritage over the past, 5 or 6 years. And I've done this a number of times over the past 6 months. If you take a sample of apps, either randomly or of the top N apps off the App Store, and actually inspect those to find out whether people are delivering on XAML and C# or HTML and JavaScript, you normally find something like a 70% skew in favor of the XAML C# track. The XAML C# stuff tends to be easy to write as well. The tooling is a little more refined because of the fact that Microsoft has put more. It's borrowing more engineering heritage that they've had available. So really, I mean, my strong recommendation is to go down the XAML route and only go down the HTML5 route if you really need to. Apps that tend to use the HTML5 route that you find in the App Store tend to be republishing content from the web. An interesting sort of side note about this is the built-in communication apps, so the calendar, the people, the contacts, and the mail app in Windows 8 are HTML JavaScript.
So it seems to me that the Microsoft base of developers are using C#, and then web developers who have used HTML and JavaScript are kind of coming over and testing the waters. And like you said, some of the more basic apps that you'll find, even with Microsoft, are using HTML and JavaScript. What about the idea of sort of using HTML, JavaScript, where you can basically develop once and then go across the different platforms? Do you think that's another reason they brought that in?
Yeah, I think the way this came out of Redmond was that Microsoft wanted to use the HTML5 track to onboard people from non-Microsoft platforms. I think that was kind of a spurious thinking, sort of an ivory tower, Microsoft is in charge of the world thinking, which isn't really harmonious with the way that the open web world works. If you think about PhoneGap, which is a classic example of a technology stack that allows you to run HTML5 cross-platform, it doesn't translate very well into the sort of the Microsoft design aesthetic, what used to be called Metro. So, for example, web apps tend to be designed with vertical scrolling, but on Windows 8 apps, they're all horizontal scrolling. So it doesn't. You tend to have to redo all the layout anyway, and then there are things like the whole way the WinJS has been constructed. It doesn't fit that well into how JavaScript actually works. So it was a good effort, but it isn't there yet. The logic is sound, but it hasn't been done as well as it needs to be done. I mean, it may get there in a few years, but it's not there now.
And I know they've. Can you talk a little bit about TypeScript, which I know has come up recently?
Yeah, so TypeScript is interesting. It's very interesting because it shows what Microsoft are having to do in order to be more in keeping with sort of open web standards and how that community approaches their software development efforts. TypeScript is the idea that you can take it. Microsoft talk about this idea of application scale. So if you want to write a really big app in JavaScript, they sort of come at it from the perspective that if you're trying to build a very big app, it's very, very difficult because JavaScript doesn't really help you do that in the way that something like Java or .NET does. So TypeScript is designed to allow you to put some type safety, some strongly typed arrangements and other constructs on the language to try and make it easier to build componentized apps at scale. Where that ends up will be interesting. I mean, it's only been out a few months now, so it's still very early doors for that.
Right. Where do you think we'll see the Windows 8 market for apps in 6 months to a year?
That's a really good question. I think in the consumer space, it's going to take about it's going to be at least the end of 2013 before it starts to show any legs at all. Right now, at the end of 2012, where people are talking about whether it's getting any uptake, whether Surface is selling well, it is way too premature to be talking about that. It's way too premature to be pulling analysts' comments out. I think there are some enterprises which have been waiting for Windows 8 to happen and Windows RT to happen. The enterprise story has to get better with the management tools, which in the beginning of next year, when Intune comes out with its ability to manage Windows RT devices, that'll be a big difference. So I think we'll start to see some very early doors applications in enterprises start to happen next year.
And so, final question that kind of goes along with that: what do you think of the Surface Pro? Do you think that has a lot of people waiting for that?
Yeah, it seems to be popular, doesn't it? It's just an Ultrabook, yeah. So
yeah,
it's it will sell as well as Ultrabooks do, I think. And the supply chain will naturally sort out having touch capability on Ultrabooks, and we'll see that on all Ultrabooks happening and low-end notebooks happening over the next year.
Well, it's fascinating, and I am interested to see what will happen. And have enjoyed working with you on your book. So thank you for joining me.
No, thank you.